What's going on, guys? So in front of you, you were looking at some really cool products from some awesome manufacturers. All of these were provided by eTrailer.com, my official channel sponsor, so I could create this review and evaluation video. People have been asking me for years what my opinion is on various shock-absorbing hitches. Basically, hitches that have some type of suspension built into them to reduce the amount of vibration and harshness between the truck and the trailer and the trailer and the truck, which can actually reduce damage to things that you might be towing behind you, or even pain and discomfort for the folks who are going to be sitting in the truck. So in front of you, you are looking at 4 brands who absolutely are credible in this space, make a ton of products, and they've put a ton of engineering into their design. So let's talk about these real quick and see what they're all about. Hang tight, I'll be right back. So the brands in front of you are Shocker Hitch, Gen Y, Curt, and Bulletproof. Now the Bulletproof hitch I actually have on one of my shelves, but this is the insert that goes into the channel for that hitch. They are all designed with some form of shock absorption built into them, and they all do things a little bit different. Most of them kind of operate around a similar principle, but at the same time, the way they execute on that is completely different. Now, one thing you do want to keep in mind, and one of the reasons why we have 2 different Gen Y hitches here, is because they both operate under different loads, but we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to them. Starting over on this side, we have Shocker Hitch. So Shocker is a very reputable name in this space. They make a lot of really great products for gooseneck, fifth wheel, and conventional towing. The 2 products you see here are slightly different. This one has a 2.5-inch shank, and this one has a 3-inch shank. They're both rated at 20,000 pounds with up to 2,000 pounds worth of tongue weight capacity. You can see the large airbags in the back, which once you inflate after hitching up your trailer, it's gonna raise up. This bushing will make contact and you'll know you're at the right PSI, which is a really cool, intuitive way of helping you understand when you need to stop putting air in the bag. Now, that said, the 2 different ball assemblies you see here are designed for different applications in some sense. This one right here is a rise application, which means if you need to have the ball sit higher in this hitch, you can actually put it up and it will sit a little bit higher. This is the dual ball setup, which has the 2 5/16 as well as the 2-inch ball, and this one can only go up so far. What you cannot do with a Shocker hitch like this is flip the entire hitch assembly around like you can with some of these others. So with the Gen Y, I can flip the whole assembly around if I need to go higher up into a rise position, but I can't do that with the Shocker hitch. So you do want to be sure and cautious and careful of which one you buy if you're buying Shocker, that it's going to have the right setup for your specific towing application, understanding that you cannot flip this hitch assembly upside down in your receiver. So just keep that in mind. But we do have both the 2-ball configuration as well as the riser configuration with the 2 5/16-inch ball. Again, 20,000 pound rated, 2,000 pounds worth of tongue capacity, and you can adjust the airbag to help accommodate that. Now, the other cool thing about this is this little flap right here, which you might wonder how strong that is. That actually rests against the bottom side of the receiver in the vehicle. So there's not going to be a tremendous amount of force on that. And they even include a bump stop right here for certain truck applications where you might need it. Next to it, we have the Gen Y Boss series. Now, these are part of their Torsion Flex lineup, which essentially means that inside of these tubes, there's 4 rubber bands, essentially, or rubber bars that act as torsion bars, similar to torsion suspension. And the way they work is they're dialed in specifically to the type of hitch that they're installed in, and the amount of weight that presses down or pulls up on it determines how this twists inside of those rubber beams or those rubber bands. Now, here's the interesting thing to know about Gen Y. If you just want to go out and buy the biggest, heaviest duty version of this that you can buy, but you only have a 10,000 pound trailer, you're basically going to be spending a lot of money on a really huge hitch that's not going to give you much shock absorption. Mainly because this right here in this setup is rated at 21,000 pounds towing, but here's the key, 2,400 pound hitch weight capacity. So in order for this torsion flex to really work, you have to have a tremendous amount of weight sitting over the back of this, in the realm of about 1,700 to 2,400 pounds, somewhere in between there. If you're only running 800 pounds or 900 pounds or less, or even 1,000 pounds of tongue weight on the back of this, it's not going to be enough to articulate these arms inside of the rubber that's inside of here and you're just not going to get much shock absorption out of it. And you're going to spend a lot of money on a huge, super beefy hitch that's not really going to benefit you very much. So that's why we have this one right here. This one's rated at a much lower 16,000 pounds, which is still pretty dang high. It has a 2.5-inch shank versus a 3-inch shank, and this one has a tongue weight capacity of 1,700 pounds. But ideally, you can be between about 1,000 and 1,700 pounds of weight on this for these to articulate. And you can see the size difference. They're pretty noticeable. This has 2.5-inch receiver openings. These are 2-inch openings, 2.5-inch shank versus a 3-inch shank. And they even have these that go down to 10,000 pounds worth of rating, which means if you have a lighter trailer and that's what you're concerned about, you know, reducing some shock in, then you can get that one. It only comes in a 2-inch shank configuration, so it's really going to be for your lighter duty vehicles, or you'll probably have to use a reducer in order for it to work with your vehicle. That said, though, 10,000 pounds, 16,000 pounds, and 21,000. I think they even have one that goes up to 32,000 pounds. But again, you want to buy the Gen Y Boss torsion hitch specific to the types of trailers you will be towing. It is not always the best practice to get the biggest, beefiest hitch you can get just because you want those numbers, when in fact, if you do it with this hitch, you're very likely going to be in a scenario where the shock absorption feature isn't ever going to come into play because you won't have enough weight to actually cause it to work. So just keep that in mind. We got both of them because we have the ability to dial in the trailer to way over 1,800 pounds or well under 1,700 pounds, so we can test both of these in a real-world environment and see how they perform. So down here, you have the Curt Rebellion XD. This is also a shock-absorbing hitch. The reason I only have one pin in right now is because they put a rubber bushing on the other side of the hitch head right here, and that rubber bushing essentially is to make it kind of an anti-rattle piece, and you have to put a lot of weight on this thing to be able to get that second pin in. I don't really care for that, but it works and it makes it convenient. It's just difficult sometimes to get this assembly off if you need to change the height. But the way they achieve shock absorption is through this big rubber bushing right here, and it essentially compresses. So it's pretty easy to tell what this thing does. You have a pivot point right here, you put weight onto it, that weight is going to compress this rubber, and as you hit bumps and you go over different types of, you know, imperfections in the road, it's going to press and it's going to cause this to kind of have a spring effect. This specific one is rated at 15,000 pounds with 1,500 pounds worth of maximum hitch weight capacity, and we'll absolutely be able to get right to that number or even slightly below it if we need to, so we can test that out. Now, the Bulletproof adapter here, this right here is actually called their heavy-duty road suppressor dual ball system. So this is kind of similar to the Curt Rebellion, except the Curt Rebellion has a single pivot point up top, and it pivots back and forth on this rubber bushing, whereas the Bulletproof has a rubber bushing on the bottom and a rubber bushing on the top, and it rocks. So you have your center pivot point, and what's interesting, if you actually look at the way they've made this, the balls are actually angled back slightly. So when you look at this, at first you might think, well, is it bent wrong? No, this ball kind of angles back this way and this ball angles back that way. Because once you put the trailer weight on it, it's going to actually cause this to flex down and the ball will be directly underneath the coupler. So it's definitely a different take on it. Both of these utilize a rubber compression design. These utilize a torsional flex design where it's twisting, and these utilize airbags. Which one do you think is going to perform the best? I know most people typically gravitate towards airbag as being the smoothest, best ride, but there's a lot of people who may not want to use airbags because, quite frankly, it's something that could fail or it's something that could wear out. I would say probably a little quicker than, you know, big thick rubber bands or big pieces of rubber that are used for compression. But these are the hitches that will be featured in this evaluation. All of these are pretty dang expensive. So whenever you're looking at a product like this, it's kind of like buy once, cry once, right? You want to get the one that's right for you. You want to know which one is going to perform the way you expect it to perform because you're spending a lot of money on these products. And I know most people really want to get the most bang for their buck. Now, notably missing is AirSafe, who makes another version of a shock-absorbing hitch. I wasn't able to get one of those. It would have been kind of cool to feature in this video. But these are products that are extremely popular and ones that a lot of folks have been asking about for a long time, especially the shocker hitch. I get so many folks asking me about the shocker hitch, but then a lot of folks say, why get the shocker hitch when you can get the Gen Y hitch? So this is really going to be to answer those questions. We're going to be able to dial the weight in using a trailer that, if you guys have been watching the last few videos on preparing for this evaluation, you probably have seen that I've loaded up some huge sandbags with some serious weight, loaded them in the front part of the trailer so I could get the hitch weight up to where it needs to be to properly actuate the suspension characteristics of some of these, because I want to make this a very real, very honest, and credible review and evaluation. And we're even going to throw some technology into it just to kind of see if any of these perform better than the others in terms of shock absorption. So that'll be really cool. It'll be really interesting to find out. The one thing I really won't be able to tell you too much about is overall long-term dependability in the long run. Basically, you know, if you put 10, 20, 30,000 miles on your trailer towing with your hitch, I can't speak to that because the evaluation period's not going to run that long. But I can definitely tell you how they perform from a shock dampening perspective, how comfortable the ride is before and after, and we will absolutely start everything off towing a trailer without any type of shock absorption hitch. We'll probably use my Gen Y Mega hitch that does not have any shock absorption built into it. We'll get a baseline so we kind of understand what things are like before you install one of these, and then we'll do individual videos on more details, how they work, how to install them, how to get them set up properly, how to couple to them, and then how to tow with them, and what that towing experience is like, and what the numbers look like. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you enjoyed this video. I sure hope you're as anxious as I am to kick this thing off. Some of these hitches are stupid heavy, and I'm sure that also plays into some of this as well. So understanding how much these things weigh, how easy they are to move around, and if you really want to pull one of these out of the back of your vehicle every time you want to tow, because I hate to say it, some of these stick out so far, you probably just don't want to leave them in there all the time. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you enjoyed this video. Please take a moment, subscribe to the channel so you get notifications on when we start this hitch evaluation, and you can specifically see if the hitch that you're in favor of performs the way you're thinking it will. Anyways, guys, again, if you haven't had a chance, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.